Welcome to IVF This, episode 205, IVF and Performative Coping. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, 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 my beautiful friends. I hope you are all doing so well today. Today I'm going to talk about something that I think a lot of us do, and not just within the infertility community. I think anyone across the world does this, particularly women. It's largely what we do. But the vast majority of us don't even realize we're doing it, right? And may never realize we're doing it until something is brought to the surface. So we're talking about performative coping. And before you immediately think like, I'm not performing anything, cool out, stay with me. It's not an indictment. It's just an observation, okay? Because when I say performative coping, I'm not talking about being fake. And I think that's what a lot of people worry about when performative anything comes up. I'm not talking about lying. I'm not talking about pretending you're okay when you're not. I'm talking about something that is much more subtle than that. I'm talking about the gap that develops between what we're actually experiencing and what we believe we're supposed to look like while we're experiencing it. Okay. It's the gap between authentic coping and socially acceptable coping. Because here's the strange contradiction that we live inside. We talk about emotions more than ever, right? Social media, more people are getting therapy than have ever gotten therapy in their lives. We talk about trauma. We tell people to feel their feelings. We tell people that all feelings are valid. And on paper, beautiful. It's beautiful. But in practice, I think many of us have discovered that not all feelings are equally welcome. You can be sad, but not for too long. You can be angry, just not in a way that makes anyone else feel uncomfortable. You can be struggling. Just make sure you're also resilient, or at least looking resilient. You can be grieving, just like don't make it awkward for everyone else, right? The message often becomes you can have feelings, just not like those feelings and not that intensely, and certainly not for that long. And nowhere do I see this contradiction more clearly than in infertility and IVF, because infertility doesn't fit neatly into like the emotional scripts people understand. It's repetitive, it's invisible, it's uncertain, and it's ongoing. And because of that, many women slowly begin learning how to perform coping rather than experience coping. I think part of what makes performative coping so seductive is that most of us inherited a pair of archetypes long before infertility ever entered the space, but certainly as soon as infertility became part of our story. On one side, there's the good infertile woman, right? She's hopeful, she's resilient, she's positive, she's strong, she's grateful. She handles things with grace, she finds meaning in the struggle, she inspires other people, and sad sometimes, but never consumed by it. Angry sometimes, but never overtaken by it. She's suffering, but she's suffering correctly, quietly. And on the other side is the woman we're silently warned not to become, the bitter, infertile woman, the resentful one, the jealous one, the angry one, the one who can't celebrate other people's pregnancies, the one who can't seem to move on, the one whose grief is become far too visible, too uncomfortable, too inconvenient. Now, to be clear, these are caricatures, right? These are archetypes, they're cultural stories. But I think many of us have absorbed them as culture and society tells us to, nonetheless. Society doesn't just tell us what to aspire to, it also tells us what to avoid. It says, be resilient, be hopeful, be grateful. And underneath that message is another one, because you don't want to become bitter, right? You don't want to become one of those women. And so many women find themselves trapped between these two identities, not allowing themselves to fully acknowledge their anger because they're afraid it means becoming bitter, not allowing themselves to fully acknowledge their jealousy because they're afraid it means they're becoming resentful, not allowing themselves to fully acknowledge the depth of their grief because they're afraid it means they're losing themselves. So instead, they perform the good infertile woman, not because she's authentic, not at all, but because she's safe. She feels accepted and acceptable. But I will say, I don't think either of these women actually exist. I think they're archetypes. I think no one is fully either one of those. There are cultural characters society created to tell women how we're supposed to suffer. Now, a few episodes ago, maybe like 5 episodes ago or something like that, we talked about emotional perfectionism, the belief that there is a right way to feel. Performative coping is emotional perfectionism's like public relations department. Okay. Emotional perfectionism says, I need to feel correctly. Performative coping says, I need people to see me feeling correctly. Right. Now we're not just monitoring our emotions, we're monitoring how our emotions are perceived. Not, am I okay? But do I look okay? Not, what am I feeling? But what will people think if they see that I'm feeling? Right. And that shift is everything. I think underneath performative coping is a hidden question most people never ask out loud, but it's there. The question is, what version of my suffering will still be lovable? Not what is true, but what is acceptable. What version of this grief will allow me to remain the strong one, the capable one, the positive one, the easy one, the good one? My beautiful friends, that is such a heartbreaking question, because it means we've stopped asking ourselves what we need and we've started asking ourselves what other people can tolerate. But here's the thing, I don't think most performative coping is for other people. It can be, but I think it's mostly for us. Because if I asked most people what they want when they say, I just want to cope better, what they often mean is, I want this to stop affecting me. I want to stop crying. I want to stop thinking about it. I want to stop feeling devastated. I want to stop feeling jealous. I want to stop feeling terrified. I want to put my big girl pants on and just muscle through. I want zero emotional upheaval. And I get it. Like, of course we do. Who wouldn't? But somewhere along the way, we've accidentally begun defining coping as the absence of distress. Now, that line, when I wrote it, gave me the chills, so I'm going to repeat it one more time. Somewhere along the way, we've accidentally begun defining coping as the absence of distress, as though good coping means not being affected. If I were really coping, I wouldn't be this anxious. If I were really coping, I wouldn't be crying after appointments. If I were really coping, I wouldn't be checking the portal or my email every 15 minutes. If I were really coping, I wouldn't still be devastated. But that's not coping. That's emotional anesthesia. And this is where performative coping starts overlapping with something we've discussed in an episode. I don't remember how long ago it was, but in an episode titled Self-Gaslighting. Because performative coping doesn't work without self-gaslighting. Something painful happens, a failed cycle, a disappointing update, a pregnancy announcement, a loss, and you have a completely normal human reaction: grief, fear, anger, jealousy, disappointment. And then almost immediately, the negotiation begins. It's not that bad. Other people have it worse. I should be grateful. At least I have options. Maybe I'm overreacting. I shouldn't be this upset. I need to stay positive. Notice what happens. The goal isn't then understanding. The goal is emotional evacuation. Get the feeling out. Get back to functioning. Get back to productivity. Get back to control. Many of us think that we're coping when we're actually trying to talk ourselves out of having a human reaction. We minimize, we'll rationalize, we compare, we dismiss, we explain away. We turn every emotional experience into a debate, not because we're weak, but because we've confused coping with not being affected. We've confused resilience with emotional minimalism. And we've confused strength with suppression. And I do think there is another layer here. Performative coping isn't just about sadness. It's about all of the emotions that don't fit into the quote unquote healing narrative. The jealousy, the bitterness, the resentment, the pettiness, the rage, the moment where someone announces a pregnancy and your first thought is, I don't want to hear about this shit. This is the last thing I need right now. The moments where you don't feel generous or evolved or spiritually enlightened. The moments where you're just hurting. And instead of saying, this makes sense, why I'm hurting, why I'm feeling this way, we start editing. We start sanitizing, polishing. We make the emotions more socially acceptable. Because what we're often performing isn't wellness, it's goodness. We're trying to prove that we're still a good person while we suffer. And I think this is where we've gotten ourselves all kinds of turned around. Coping was never supposed to mean not feeling. Coping was never supposed to mean emotional neutrality. Coping was never supposed to mean invulnerability. Coping means and has always meant to continue moving through life while having emotional experiences, not eliminating the emotional experience. One of the cruelest things we've done to ourselves is mistaken emotional pain for evidence that we're coping badly. Most often, emotional pain is evidence that something matters to us. The hurt is not a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that you care. It's a sign that you love. It's a sign that you long for something. So maybe we stop asking ourselves, am I coping well? And start asking ourselves, am I being honest? Instead of asking, how does this look? Ask, how does this feel? Instead of measuring coping by appearance, measure it by congruence. Am I telling myself the truth? Am I allowing myself to access what's actually here? Am I staying connected to myself while this unfolds around me? Because I got to tell you, authentic coping is not polished. It is not inspirational, and it isn't always what we think of as like resilient looking. Sometimes authentic coping is like weeping, snot-ridden crying in the Target parking lot. Sometimes it looks like canceling plans. Sometimes it looks like being so angry. Sometimes it looks like needing support. Sometimes it looks like not having the slightest idea of how you should feel. Authentic coping is not emotional perfection. It is emotional honesty. And if you take one thing from this episode, I want it to be this. You do not owe anyone an inspiring version of your infertility experience. You do not owe anyone resilience on demand. You do not owe anyone a silver lining. You do not owe anyone growth before you are ready. And you certainly do not owe yourself the impossible task of being unaffected by something that matters deeply to you, maybe matters more than anything else has mattered to you. You are allowed to be devastated without being inspirational. You are allowed to be angry without immediately finding the lesson, if there is a lesson to be had. You are allowed to be jealous without trying to force it into gratitude. You are allowed to be struggling without making it digestible for other people. Because your humanity is not a performance. And your worth is not determined by how beautifully or inspirationally you suffer. The goal was never to become someone who suffers beautifully. The goal is to become someone who can tell the truth about their suffering. And those are not the same thing. Okay. All right, my beautiful friends. That is what I have for you today. I want you to take such good care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.